Hello everyone, I'm thrilled you're back for another delicious baking recipe. Now this time I am making my blueberry cheesecake bars. Now there are bars that are dainty and small and that you pick up and eat with your fingers. This is a dessert bar, so get out your dessert fork and get ready to make this recipe. Now this is a crumble bar, so that means instead of a conventional cheesecake baked in a square pan, I actually make a crumb base and use it as a streusel topping to protect the cheesecake filling in between. So that's where I'll start. The easy streusel you can make by hand. I've got my flour in my mixing bowl, and to that, it is a sweeter streusel, so I add a combination of granulated sugar and some light brown sugar. And what's a streusel without a little bit of cinnamon? And to balance the sweetness, a touch of salt. I will be using a pastry blender, so I'll just use it right now to blend everything in, break down those light brown sugar pieces. I've already cut up my butter into pieces, so I can add that all at once. And the butter has been softened. It's at, I would say, a cool room temperature, so that the pieces stay intact, but they'll work in easily into the streusel. Now, if you're new to the streusel world, when you're cutting in your butter, you may find, and this is happening, you get a lot of lumps sticking to your pastry blender. That's just part of the process as you start working in the butter. This is not a fussy technique. When it comes to making a pie dough, you want to break down the butter into pieces of a certain size. But here, we just really want to incorporate the butter so you don't have any big pieces, so it bakes evenly as both the base and the streusel topping. Could you pop this into a food processor and blend it? You could, but be very quick about it. 1, 2, 3 to work in that butter. Otherwise, you're going to end up making yourself a nice cinnamon cookie dough. There we go. When you're making a streusel using cool butter, you'll find you get this rough, crumbly texture. If you wanted a streusel with some more crunchy bits in it, say for on top of a loaf or a batch of muffins, you could add melted butter. It mixes up faster, but you get those crunchy pieces. Not what I'm after here with these cheesecake bars. I've got my pan greased and lined with parchment paper, and I'm gonna put about 2/3 of this into the bottom of the pan, spread it out. And you can use a glass or the back of a spoon to just press it in. I like this streusel crust because it has a little more character than a traditional cheesecake graham crust to it. Okay. You can take a fork and just gently pierce the crust. This allows the heat to get in, just to cook it more evenly. It is a thicker streusel crust because it has to hold the weight of this cream cheese filling. I've preheated my oven to 350. This bakes for about 25 minutes and it'll turn a nice golden brown on the surface, and you want to let it cool before you make your filling. While that bakes, I'll add the finishing ingredient to the streusel layer that is going to go on top of my cheesecake filling. This is optional, of course, but I'm adding a few sliced almonds. I find they're wasted if you add them to the base, so I just stir them in on top, and they toast up beautifully and give your cheesecake bar a nice little added crunch. All right, I'll set that aside. Here's the crust out of the oven and cooled, and you can see it really does take on a shortbread kind of look to it. Now it's time to work on that filling, and it is truly a cheesecake filling with lots of cream cheese. No dainty squares here. I have my softened cream cheese. You can do this in a mixer if you wish, But now and again, I like to show you that recipes like this can be done by hand. All right, I've got some very chilly cream cheese, but once I add a bit of sugar, and just like the streusel, I've got a combination of granulated and light brown sugar. I'll work in just a little sugar to start, just to prevent lumps. Now, my little bit of light brown sugar. I also like to add a touch of sour cream when I'm adding my vanilla to the cheesecake base. Get my vanilla in there. This is a good time to switch to a whisk now that it's softened up nicely. And before I add the eggs, I will add just a little bit of all-purpose flour. Now, that said, I made the streusel using all-purpose flour. If you'd like to make a gluten-free version of this recipe, streusel is an easy base to adapt. So you could use your favorite gluten-free baking blend in place of it, bake your base as usual, and replace the flour in the filling with cornstarch. All right, now it's time for the eggs. I've got 3 eggs to add to the recipe. I'll loosen them up by whisking them with a fork. Just makes them easier to add. If you've decided to opt out of the workout by mixing this filling by hand, you can mix your cream cheese, your sugar, your sour cream, your flour, all on medium or even medium-high speed, scraping your bowl often as you go along. But just like making a conventional cheesecake, once it's time to start adding the eggs, you slow down your mixing speed. Whisking by hand, there's no concern, but you do that so that you don't work in excess air into the cheesecake filling, causing it to souffle and then potentially develop a crack as it cools. Put the remaining eggs in. Okay, now the filling is ready to pour into my pan. And you'll notice I'm not stirring the blueberries into the cheesecake batter itself. I learned the hard way the first time I made this recipe. I stirred the blueberries into the cheesecake batter, and cheesecake batter taking so long to cook in the oven, what happened to the blueberries? They all sank right to the bottom. So what I do is I take my fresh blueberries, and I do find this recipe works better with fresh than frozen, is I sprinkle them on top. So as the cheesecake slowly bakes, starts setting on the bottom and the sides a bit, it holds the blueberries in place. So they do settle into the filling a little, but they don't sink right to the bottom. Move my blueberries about. And now for my remaining streusel topping with the almonds. that you can just loosely sprinkle on top. There we go. You can really see how the cheesecake filling fills up this pan. This is a substantial dessert. What I do love about the streusel layer on top is, guess what you don't have to worry about at all when it comes to making a cheesecake? The cheesecake cracking. The streusel on top protects the filling, and even if a little crack were to develop, it would be hidden under the streusel topping itself. Now, just like a conventional cheesecake, this takes a fair bit of time to bake. I still have my oven at 350, and I bake this for 30 minutes. Then I reduce the temperature to 325, and it goes for another 30 minutes to really set the filling. And just like checking a conventional cheesecake, you do the jiggle test. If there's a little jiggle in sort of the center 3 inches of this pan, but it's set on the outside, then you know you're done. And you shouldn't really see any souffling on the sides, the outside edges of the pan. Just like a cheesecake, you want to let these cheesecake bars cool to room temperature on the counter before you put them in the fridge, and give them overnight if you can, minimum 4 to 6 hours to chill. So I'll peel away the parchment. And at this point, with the streusel set and protecting the cheesecake bars, these are a lot less fragile than a typical cheesecake. You can't do that with your everyday cheesecake. A little dusting of icing sugar is always nice, especially with a streusel. And then it's time to portion. So do you want dainty small bars, or do you want those dessert size portions? Oh, look at that. Isn't that gorgeous? And you can really see how the blueberries kind of find their space when it comes to where it belongs in the cheesecake filling itself. There we go. Doesn't that look absolutely stunning? Hold that thought. I have to grab a fork. Ho-ho. You got lots of cheesecake filling, the cinnamon streusel topping and base, little scattering of almonds. Of course, I know you like to make these recipes your own, so you can switch it up, use raspberries in place of blueberries. You could use cranberries, but keep in mind, cranberries float, so it's a good idea to chop them up before you add them to your cheesecake filling. But now you've got a recipe for a flawless blueberry cheesecake bar. I hope you'll give this recipe a try, share it with your friends and family, and feel proud about what you've accomplished. I can't wait to see you again for another delicious recipe. Oh, those are good blueberries too. Oh, that crust has a lot of flavor. Good crunch too.